So chat, let's have an interesting conversation today. Why do you people in the chat feel like some fighting games become more popular than others? I see IP, marketing, game modes. That's also a good one. Whatever is that Evo, there's some legitimacy to that. So yeah, I think you guys said some of the biggest ones that I had on my list for why certain fighting games are definitely more popular than others. So let's go ahead and break down a few of these as to some examples of some games that were popular and some that weren't so popular in the same fashion as far as like how these things were done. So chat, if we turn our heads to some glorious Steam charts, and of course Steam charts are not the end all be all when it comes to results of how successful a game is. This is just showcasing some basic numbers dealing with two different type of games here, and there's going to be another factor that's going to come into play here that we're going to talk about as well. So Melty Blood Type Lumina, one of my personal favorite games, one of the games that literally kickstarted my fighting game channel. The moment I heard this game was announced, super excited. I made the YouTube channel and I was ready to talk about Melty Blood Type Lumina. I love this game for what it is, but of course, you know, as far as the numbers and stuff it don't really do the best as far as like certain things because of a multitude of things that happen. But the marketing for this game was actually pretty decent. You know, there was a lot of videos that they kept trying to feed us. They kept feeding us videos every so often. So like every week we know we had like 2 character videos and stuff like that. And there's sort of a smaller budget when it comes to a smaller team, and that's one of the bigger or downsides that we're going to be talking about here, because we compare it to the other game that I'm talking about here, which is Guilty Gear Strive, right? Now, if you remember what Guilty Gear Strive did, Guilty Gear Strive had 2 betas. So on top of having the betas, they also had big personalities in the mix. So if you remember when they did the beta, they actually had like sort of a personality day or something where they had a closed version of the game that was only playable to the selected people that they gave copies to, and they gave it to a lot of some of the big people inside the FGC. So if you're a big head, they gave like them copies. I believe like Sageham got one, and a few other, you know, big names inside the FGC got some. And then of course they gave it to some other big just online personalities, like say some VTubers that were interested in fighting games, like say Mori from Hololive, I believe her name is, the Grim Reaper girl. So getting other audience that probably wouldn't even be interested into looking at a fighting game actually interested in a fighting game like that is a pretty unique way to do it that a lot of people haven't done. Like a lot of companies haven't really tried that, to like try to get other big people, other personalities on board like that to try to showcase the game off, rather than like sort of having it already sort of in mind. Like, you know, if you look at the Street Fighter, the Capcom way, they'll have like, you know, big personality sort of exhibitions. Like I believe when Street Fighter 5 came out, it was Mike Ross versus somebody, I believe, when they were showcasing Street Fighter 5 for the first time. And you know, this is something that of course the FGC is going to like. You know, we like the personalities of Mike and some other people and stuff like that, but when it comes to actually bringing in a new audience, right, bringing in some people that wouldn't necessarily look at your game, this is a very interesting take on how to do it, and this was a very smart move for Guilty Gear Strive or Arc Sys in general to do. Now once again, if we go to the Melty Blood Type Lumina things, this is probably something they didn't have the budget for, right? This is something that's probably outside of the budget. This is a much smaller team than Arc Sys French Bread is. Now at the very least, what they probably could have done is they probably could have at least made a beta for the game, open beta, and just had people sort of come in if they wanted to have a small budget to, like, you know, sort of get a few personalities in there, be like, hey, can you play the game and like try it out, you know, show your audience the game. That could have probably been a nice step in the door as far as how to get some more eyes on the actual title. So chat, whoever said marketing, that was definitely 100% correct. Marketing is a huge thing that definitely plays a part as far as fighting games actually becoming big. Now, another good thing that someone definitely said in chat is IP. Dragon Ball FighterZ was one of the biggest games that definitely put Arc Sys on the map. You know, Guilty Gear Xrd was a very good game, very beautiful game, but a lot of people actually didn't play it like that. You know, a lot of people like they want to get inside of Guilty Gear, or like they like the Arc style and stuff, but Xrd, to your surprise, may actually surprise you that game was actually not as popular as you may have thought. Dragon Ball FighterZ was the biggest game that Arc Sys has done. And why was it so successful? It was just because of the amount of care that they used for the source material to create a very beautiful design game revolved around a very iconic IP that is Dragon Ball. I mean, when the game first came out, you could find plenty of videos of people breaking down move references that you see that the characters are doing from the actual manga pages and just putting them side by side comparisons, just showing how much care and how much thought went into every single move inside of every character's kit. It was like, it's ridiculous, like how much care. It shows that Arc Sys is the people to actually have your IP ran. That's why, you know, a lot of these companies now are trying to go to Arc Sys when it comes to making these type of games. That's why we have DNF Duel, right? So probably expect a couple more games like this that Arc Sys is going to be using IPs for, that companies are definitely going to want them to make, because obviously it works and they just have a nice formula that's going, that works very well. Now, another big one, chat, that I forget if anyone mentioned was definitely game modes. You know, the amount of stuff to do inside of a game is definitely important. Take a good example for Street Fighter 5. When Street Fighter 5 came out, it was not the most successful game. That game did not perform that well at all, and it was mainly because the game had a word of mouth of a lack of modes inside of it. The game didn't have the story mode yet. I believe the arcade mode wasn't like a complete arcade mode at on time. The only thing it really had was survival mode. You had the combo trials, training room, and online. That's pretty much, that was all there. And for a fighting game enthusiast or a fighting game competitor, that's pretty much all you need, is some training room and some online to get you started. But for other people, they definitely want more inside of their gaming experience. You know, this is why you take a title like Mortal Kombat and why it's such a popular game with casual audience, why it has such a long-term standing casual audience base, and it's because of the amount of stuff there is to do in that game. You know, you have the 2 story modes. You have the regular story mode, then a DLC story mode, then you have, of course, the crypt itself. The crypt is also a whole nother game mode almost, with like puzzles and stuff as you're unlocking all the cool cosmetics and stuff in the game. Then the whole cosmetic system itself is actually just a complete overhaul of how your character looks. You could change completely how your character looks based on the things that you have unlocked. On top of this, they have the standard arcade mode, which has the character endings, and then they have the whole tower system as well for other unlockables and other things that you could do inside the tower system. Has like some 2v2 aspects or something, or some tag team aspects and stuff in it for a little bit. It gets a little crazy on top of, you know, all the crazy online modes that the game got. Now, another big one that no one actually mentioned was actually guest characters, and I want to make a complete video talking about, should guest characters be inside of every fighting game? I think that'll be an interesting topic. But before we talk about that, talking about just guest characters in fighting games and how they bring an audience into a fighting game. So while I don't think a fighting game needs to have guest characters to be successful, having guest characters definitely helps bring an audience that necessarily wouldn't play your game into the game, or at least introduce them to it. Good ones would definitely be Tekken, right? Tekken has a lot of that. A lot of crazy guest characters inside that game. Got people looking at Tekken a lot more than probably they would have outside of the normal FGC peeps that just like Tekken. Of course, Soul Calibur is one of the OGs doing this back since Soul Calibur like 2 with Link and Heihachi in them. So like, you know, this is something that's very big on their side. And then we could take, I guess, BB Tag, for example, that brought like the Ruby fans onto BlazBlue, right? They probably would have never even played the game until they saw the Ruby characters inside the game, which, you know, I was already a fan of those characters as well. But the fact that they actually put some characters of a franchise that I like definitely got me more interested in the game as well. Now, the only downsides to guest characters that I always personally say is, if you are not a fan of a game in general, just because your favorite character of whatever it is comes inside the game doesn't mean you're going to like the game all of a sudden. Because if you're not a fan of the core systems that's there, your character's not going to change that, right? Like, usually, unless the character is bringing some like crazy new mechanic to the game, you probably won't like the game as before it is, because the core systems of the game just not something that you like. It doesn't matter who you bring in again, especially if it's a game you already played, you say you didn't like it, and then all of a sudden they bring in your favorite characters, like, oh, my character's in the game. It's like, oh yeah, but it's still this game. So it usually don't work out for your best interest. Now, definitely another interesting one that someone definitely said inside the chat was whatever games like Evo. I mean, there's some actually legitimacy at this. I'm not even gonna lie. If you remember back when Evo was actually going to not have an online session, or not have the official offline session, and then put it online. And so a lot of the games at the time didn't have good rollback netcode. It didn't have rollback netcode at all. So then they basically said, let's add some games that don't really get a chance to shine. And we got games like Skullgirls on the roster. We got Them Fighting Hers on the roster, which Them Fighting Hers is the one I definitely want to talk about. That game saw a huge bump in popularity when that game got announced for Evo, because everybody wanted to try it out. People were like, yo, what the heck is this game? Either you never heard of it, or you just never gave it a second chance. But now it's the Evo game, everybody was on it, right? So everybody was trying out the game. You know, Sejan was making videos, and you know, I was streaming the game for a while. A lot of people were just streaming the game and like showcasing, yo, this game is actually pretty cool. It got some pretty cool things. The fact you can like, you know, go inside the files and like receive combos and stuff, and it like comes up as like the combo list maker. It is really cool. Like the type of ideas that they had inside of that game. The tutorial was really well made. They had a whole ass like adventure mode inside the online, and like the salt mines or something. It was crazy. Like the game was absolutely ridiculous. But then it's like after that Evo period ended, like that game just dropped off, right? It's like nobody was talking about the game no more. It's like, okay, it had its Evo time, and now everybody just like don't talk about it no more. It's like, what happened, right? It's like sometimes the popularity, I feel like, of some games are definitely going to be of what is at Evo. Now there's going to be some games that are going to be sort of different in that. Say for example, I believe, you know, DNF Duel got some pretty nice popularity. But also, if DNF Duel was definitely at Evo, like if it was an official Evo title over say like a game like Skullgirls or something like that, I definitely feel like even more people will be trying hard in that game just because it's going to be at Evo. Another good example is going to be MultiVersus. Now, MultiVersus is a completely different topic because it's a free-to-play game, one of the first free-to-play games, and it does a lot of good things for the FGC. That game is doing huge numbers, way higher than like a lot of the big games like Tekken and stuff like that would do on the Steam charts. But it's also going to be an Evo, even though it's not an official main tournament, it's going to have a tournament for a 2v2 for $100,000. So a lot of people are definitely getting ready for that. And of course, chat, what would this conversation be without talking about online? I saw a lot of you guys in the chat say it. I know I just didn't say it out loud, but I did see a lot of you guys say that one as well. Online, right? We are in the rollback area. Everybody feels like every fighting game should have rollback, and you know, rollback inside of fighting games, when it's implemented properly, is definitely the best feeling in the world when it comes to your fighting game online experience. It's just no hands down. The simple rollback netcode just cannot compete compared to what we have now. A game I definitely felt that got mad shade for this was going to be Granblue Fantasy Versus. Granblue Fantasy Versus, I feel like, is a great game, right? It just came out at the wrong time, right during the pandemic. It did not have the best netcode, so a lot of the people that were interested inside to playing the game because of the next big Arceus game, you know, they're taking another IP once again, like we were talking about, off the Dragon Ball FighterZ hype train and stuff like that. So people, you know, you got all these different people coming from all these different type of communities, from the anime community, from, you know, Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat community, all coming together to one other game once again. Yet the game online, it was just not the best thing, and on top of not having ping or netcode indicators for when you actually go in the lobby, it was like you're playing gacha inside of the game itself. So it definitely sucks to see a game not get the spotlight it deserves because of something like that. And of course, if that game definitely had a rollback netcode, a lot of people expressed they would definitely pick up the game again because that's something they truly want. You know, the game is doing all right. It does have a very strong, tight-knit PC community. So if you are into that game, definitely go inside the PC community and play the game. They would love to have you. There's a lot of, you know, beginners and stuff like that as well if you're new to the game and stuff. But just the fact that the game just didn't have that big spectacle of opportunity because of the offline scenes not being there, and just because it didn't have the best properly implemented rollback. It didn't have rollback at all. It just had delay base. So it just sort of just wasn't at the right time when that game came out, unfortunately. So yeah, chat, to summarize everything we've been talking about, some fighting games are definitely more successful than others due to a multitude of things. It could be anywhere from marketing to just a better IP. It could be just the timing of like when the game come out, like pandemic and stuff, not having, you know, good online. It could be a multitude of things when it comes to some fighting games is doing better than others. Unfortunately, you know, we all, or at least I would like to say, I at least like to see the success of every single fighting game. You know, I want to see every fighting game succeed out here as far as the competitive scene or just the casual audience in general. I just want to see every game grow. But unfortunately, we don't live in a society where that's necessarily possible. So some games do underperform, unfortunately. So yeah, chat, you guys already know this is going on YouTube, so I'll talk to you guys in a second. But for the people on the YouTube, let me know how you guys feel about the success of certain fighting games. What do you think happens to certain fighting games as far as why certain fighting games aren't successful as others? Do you think there's some other examples that could have been in this list? Let me know down in the comment below how you guys feel about the success or unsuccess of certain fighting games within the community. As always, if you like anything I had to say, drop me a like, really appreciate it. And if you want more from me, follow me on my socials. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn notifications so you know the next video goes live. As always, my name is Daikin, and I'll see you next time. Signing out.